Hello, I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, host of the Ask Dr. Love radio show and founder of AskDrLove.com. As Dr. Love, I've been known to use humor to help lighten things up when discussing difficult relationship issues, but today I'm speaking to you strictly as a professional doctor and a psychotherapist about a serious tragedy and issues that are no laughing matter. Today I'm talking about the question of whether Adam Lanza was an undiagnosed schizophrenic and would a proper diagnosis have averted the Newtown tragedy. This past week, 20 children, none older than 7, and 6 adults were brutally slain by 20-year-old Adam Lanza in a Newtown, Connecticut school shooting. As the world continues to grieve over the Newtown massacre, we must strive to make sense of what transpired and decipher what we are all meant to learn from this tragedy that can improve our world. This is the 4th mass shooting in this country this year. We've had 37 school shootings since Columbine. This is a big problem that is not going away. Aside from the gun control issue, which has a lot of people fired up, we're also looking at a failure of the mental health system and its prevalent modern diagnostic methods. We also need to look at whether or not SSRIs or other therapeutic drugs were involved in this catastrophe, as well as examine various familial, educational, societal, and cultural failures, including the stigmatization and alienation of the mentally ill. And of course, the entire world is also wondering whether or not it is possible to recognize a person in danger of doing this and how to help them. Beyond all the aforementioned issues, could this event also be a lens that magnifies the violence that is occurring on a worldwide scale in the wars of religion and territory, and even down to our most intimate relationships in which people act on impulse, shooting off verbal rounds at each other, including those we supposedly love, rather than following the call to be more selfless and listen with the ears of our hearts to empathize and embrace others even when we're angry ourselves. Let me begin with an analysis of Adam. Adam Lanza had been diagnosed with Asperger's, a mild form of autism often characterized by social awkwardness. People with the disorder are often highly intelligent. While they can become frustrated more easily, there is no evidence of a link between Asperger's and violent behavior. It's been reported that when people approached Adam in the hallways, he would press himself against the wall or walk in a different direction, clutching his black case like an 8-year-old who refuses to give up a teddy bear. Adam also underwent crises that required his mother to come to school to handle. Such episodes might involve total withdrawal from whatever he was supposed to be doing in class, such as sitting and reading a book. Adam had extreme difficulties relating to fellow students and teachers, as well as a strange bodily condition. One of his teachers said, if that boy would have burned himself, he would not have known it or felt it physically. While he didn't feel physical pain, he certainly must have been hurting emotionally. Was Adam's rampage an attempt to make others bear his emotional pain? There's more. Emerging research suggests that there are both clinical and biological links between autism and schizophrenia. Yet our current diagnostic hierarchy implies that the two conditions are distinct. The key takeaway point is that there are some individuals who may have both autism and schizophrenia. Adult psychiatrists and mental health professionals would benefit from further training in the diagnosis of autism in adults, and child mental health professionals would benefit from training in the diagnosis of schizophrenia spectrum disorders in youths. According to research, given the complex symptom profile in youths with schizophrenia spectrum disorders, there tends to be a delay in diagnosis, even when symptoms are present for years, and this delay could prove fatal. Why? Because there is a correlation between having a schizophrenic syndrome and increased rates of antisocial behavior in general and violence in particular, and there's a lot of research evidence that backs this up. The evidence that such associations are not just statistically, but clinically and socially significant is now overwhelming. Why, if the connection is so clear, has it not been widely recognized by clinicians and service planners? Equally puzzling is the question, why have so many researchers and reviewers in the field either obfuscated or minimized the importance of the correlations to the point of irrelevance? In addition, studies suggest that in prisons throughout the Western world, 5 to 10% of those awaiting trial for murder will have a schizophrenic disorder. In other words, while autistics may not become mass murderers, schizophrenics are far more likely to act out in violence. The failure to diagnose and treat someone who is schizophrenic leads to a greater risk of mass violence. Clinicians also need to resist the prevalent tendency to pigeonhole patients by slapping a label or diagnosis on them. Once someone is placed in a diagnostic category, clinicians are often blind to the possibility that other conditions may exist. In the case of childhood autism, we need to be aware that there can be a dual diagnosis, meaning an autistic kid can also be schizophrenic. Adam clearly showed the unusual behaviors and mood regulation difficulties that are characteristic of schizophrenia. Had a proper diagnosis been made earlier and had proper treatment been instituted, might we have averted this tragedy? The bottom line is psychiatrists and other mental health clinicians need to receive further training and education on this topic so kids like Adam don't fall through the cracks. In addition, there needs to be more vigilance on the part of the schools and their guidance counselors to be alert to problems within the students' families. Clearly, this mother was in over her head with Adam. I also suspect that his mother may have been troubled herself. Speaking of Adam's mother, it's been reported that she owned 6 guns, including semi-automatic weapons with multiple high-capacity magazines holding about 30 rounds each. These are combat weapons. Obviously, a person doesn't have these kinds of weapons at home unless she is riddled with murderous urges of her own. Why else would someone keep assault weapons? We also know that Mom took her mentally disturbed son to the shooting range. And while we don't know what went on behind closed doors, we have to wonder if Adam was raised in a rage-filled environment. Was he abused and/or taught violence? When a mother keeps assault rifles in the same house as a child who is mentally ill, she is all but giving that child a license to kill. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that Adam was beyond enraged to have shot his mother in the face. And clearly school officials need to be more vigilant and intervene in reporting families in need of assistance. In retrospect, one now sees that the writing was on the wall that Adam was destined to fall. The question is, why nobody heard the call? We also know that Adam was very different and very shy and didn't make an effort to interact with his classmates. The fact that Adam returned to his boyhood school and aimed his fire at those children's faces makes me suspect that he was also furious with the classmates of his youth. Was he bullied and humiliated because he never could relate to other kids? This event is also a wake-up call to kids around the world that they need to be kinder to the mentally ill. But there's more. We must beware of viewing this tragedy as simply a maniacal rampage by a chemically imbalanced, psychotic madman set adrift by our currently faulty diagnostic methods. In my view, this bloodbath magnifies what ails the world, the human race, every society and nation, and each of us as individuals. We are all being destroyed by our mismanaged rage. Adam's violence is ultimately an extreme acting out of pent-up rage. You don't mortally wound other human beings directing your fire at their faces if you aren't drowning in rage. On a less extreme scale, most humans are struggling with their rage. We're all guilty of acting out to a greater or lesser extent as we lash out and kill each other in various symbolic ways. In our relationships, we take shots at each other with our words, and sometimes we act out physically and smash fists into walls or faces, and sometimes that rage spews out in gunfire. All humans are born with two instincts, the life and the death instinct. The death instinct, or thanatos, is the source of aggression and hostility between people. Rage is an instinctual reaction that arises whenever we feel threatened or endangered. If we allow our rage to be bottled up, it festers and places us in danger of blowing. I call this the blivet, 50 pounds of poop in a 5-pound bag. Keep shoving more and more feelings into the bag, and it will eventually break. We also have to add to this mix impulse control. Now, the stronger our impulse control skills are, the better we will be able to contain our rage and not act out. The weaker our skills, the shorter our fuses will be and the less time it takes before we blow. Hence, a lot of bottled up rage and poor impulse control skills is the formula for disaster. When rage is turned back on the self, we see mental symptoms like depression, anxiety, self-destructive actions, drinking, smoking, reckless driving, masochism, and even suicide. And when rage is turned away from the self, we see rage directed against others. The rage that rages on a worldwide scale is ultimately the result of our collective failure to love each other properly. And this failure exists at the level of the individual family, and it bleeds outward from there to the entire world. By the way, rage is never the primary emotion. When we become angry, it's because we feel other more basic and vulnerable feelings such as hurt, sadness, and fear. I can only imagine how many times poor Adam felt hurt, sad, and afraid. Who heard his pain? And how many years did his pain and anger fester and build until it morphed into the powder keg that erupted and exploded in gunfire? Adam, in an odd way, can be seen as the messenger, a messenger sent to alert us all to the need to alter the way we handle our own angry feelings and to consider what we say before we speak, to ask ourselves how the other will feel before we say or do X, Y, or Z, to consider what we intend to say or do will be helpful and constructive to the other person and our relationship or not, and to remember that whatever you say or do boomerangs back on you. To work to cultivate the ability to be more patient and to listen to those who are angry with us and to help them to feel truly heard and understood, which in most cases resolves angry feelings. As a final note, we must all grieve and say a prayer of thanks to all the sacrificial lambs who died in this massacre. They themselves were also messengers chosen to give us all a serious wake-up call by putting this world's failings in sharp relief. Well, that is all I have to say to you on the Newtown Massacre, and I want you to really begin to make a New Year's resolution to handle your anger differently, be the pebble in the pond, and create a worldwide revolution that shifts us from a world overcome with rage, acting out in violence, to a world that is overcome with love. That's all for now, and take care. This is Dr. Jamie Turndorf.